Upper Echelon is brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte. Grant Gelink, the Chief Executive of Deloitte Southern Africa, is with us in studio today in the Upper Echelon. And it's an inspiring story, Grant. I recall now, back in 2006, when you took over as the CEO, we were in, it wasn't this studio, but we were in the MoneyWeb studio, and David Shapiro and I were chatting to you, and we discovered that you'd started life as a apprentice boilermaker, and from that way worked all the way up to being a chartered accountant. Now, I don't know how many other chartered accountants have had that life story, but for me it was a real bootstrap story. It was a real inspiration that it doesn't matter where you come from, you can achieve your goals. How did you start being a boilermaker, though, in the first place? We'll get to the chartered accountant stuff later.
I guess leaving school, I would have to go to Western Cape to do my studies, and that's quite expensive.
And you're from Durban, huh?
I'm from Durban, so it's a long way, and it would be very difficult.
Did you get a matric exemption? Was that?
I got a matric exemption, and actually at the time tried to study at University of Natal, but they of course wouldn't allow. They used to allow if you were married or if you had some other circumstances, you could get a permit to actually go to a white university in those days.
Incredible. So from the coloured community, which is where you come from, the only option for you was to go through to the Western Cape to study. Were you thinking of being an accountant even at that stage?
I didn't even know the existence of chartered accountants at the time. In fact, there's a funny story. I went to the university, and I'm sure nobody will recall it. And so I registered for history and English, and because that's the easiest subjects to study part-time. And the lady, the student advisor said to me, but your maths marks are good enough to do something else. Why don't you do BCom? I said, well, that's fine, I'll do BCom. And it turned out I learned a lot about chartered accountancy at the time, and that's why I decided to do it. But as I say, you know,
that was a long time later, though.
It was a long time later. In between, I had started an apprenticeship, but remember the company Sandoc, as you might remember from the time, went bankrupt. Not because they employed me, but they went bankrupt. I didn't really enjoy carpentry, especially the rough stuff out in the open, doing shuttering work. Always felt I needed to do something better and something different. And at the time, my aspiration was to become a teacher. It was quite difficult. And in fact, I could become a teacher in Durban, but of course, it would be difficult. You'd have to get a bursary from the government and so on. And I had a reasonably poor background, so didn't want to get involved around having big loans by the time you finish teaching. So I ended up working and took what I could get, and applied for a job as an apprentice boilermaker, got it. That closed down, and then I went to apprentice carpenter. But then I decided to join the civil service, purely so that I could study part-time and then get a degree and so on.
What did you do in the civil service?
I worked for I call them the House of Reprehensibles, but it's the old House of Representatives. And as you know, that's the old Department of Coloured Affairs. So at various times I was in charge of procurement, I was in charge of teacher staffing, and so on. But it was mainly clerical work by and large.
So you were doing clerical work, but studying part-time to become a teacher. Was that a dream? Was that an ambition?
It was a dream to be a teacher. I always admired our teachers. Quite an interesting story about our teachers, by the way. Because of job reservation, I believe a lot of them couldn't get the nice jobs and get to the limited spaces in medical school, limited spaces in the universities. So we had really good teachers, by the way, and taught us a great deal. And so there's a great deal of admiration around my teachers. And so I wanted to be a teacher.
Even though the pay wasn't that great?
Well, I didn't know the pay wasn't that great at that time. They looked very rich compared to where we were sitting.
Good point, yeah. And being a teacher, one hears it's a calling. Was it for you?
In a way, yes, I enjoyed the 6 years that I taught. But I think what happens in teaching is that you get stuck in a particular subject, and that's you for the rest of your life. Well, sure, I got promoted, and in fact, the day I walked out of teaching, I was promoted to deputy principal, and then didn't take the job. But you end up teaching the same subjects, all the time. Now, I think with a little bit of variation, I might have enjoyed it better. But maybe I wasn't such a great teacher.
Well, Grant, again, 6 years ago when we spoke at the time when you became the CEO of Deloitte, you said to us that one of your children said to you, you were telling your children they must become chartered accountants, and they looked at you and said, well, Dad, what about you?
Was actually two stories. The first one is I was teaching and I was trying to encourage the kids to become chartered accountants. One of them said to me, well, why don't you become a chartered accountant?
Oh, it was the kids. It wasn't necessarily your kids.
But in terms of my own kids, I also felt that if I didn't do something, if I didn't become a professional, it wouldn't set the bar for them. And sadly, they also became chartered accountants. I mean, the dinner conversation around can't be that that exciting around.
Well, Warren Buffett says the accountancy is the language of business, and business is pretty exciting, so I'm sure it's not that boring. But what was it about becoming a chartered accountant that attracted you?
Well, I quickly learned, I think, while I was doing part-time studies, that the most versatile, in fact, professional qualification you can have is chartered accountancy. There's very few chartered accountants who actually practice chartered accountancy. But the background, the 3-year training, getting into businesses, getting into manufacturing organizations, process organizations, service organizations, actually teaches you a whole lot about business. Makes you more cautious, but at the same time makes you excited about things that can happen and can be done.
It's a language of business, as Buffett says.
It's really the language of business. And even people who have moved on many years beyond still remember that training.
But for you, it wasn't that easy. A lot of kids today are told those stories by teachers like yourself. They come out of school, they perhaps study part-time if they can't afford to go to university, and they're straight in that channel. You were 30, or in your mid-30s when you made this decision. That's not easy.
Yeah, I was 35 and started in Deloitte at 36. But in fact, the staff partner said to me, why do you want to do this at this age? And I said to him, well, if I qualified at 40, I'd have 25 years to use the qualification. And I think that's something people need to think about. A single career is not on the cards anymore. Most people do many things, and we see it in our students, our trainees today. A lot of them don't mind coming back to the profession, but they don't want to stay in the profession from start to finish.
But how many other Grant Gelinks do you get coming to you? How many other 35-year-old teachers come in absolutely green about the accounting profession to say, I want to be a chartered accountant?
We haven't had any, sadly.
What was different about you then?
Well, I think I started out wanting to do something and then realizing that I could do a lot more than what I was doing. I just didn't feel satisfied.
But who got you there? Were there role models? Were there some people it's their wives, other people it's their priests, other people it's their fathers. Where did you come from?
I think it was a whole range of people. I think some of the teachers like Theo Lundell, Eric Stryker, that often encouraged us to do better and go further. I think it was my mother who always said, God won't give you a challenge you can't meet. So just go and do it. So when I spoke to her about it, I said, listen, I'm leaving teaching. She said to me, gee, I didn't expect you to take that far. And so I think there's a whole range of role models around. And I've been very blessed with that, very lucky around that.
You put your head down. You worked hard as an article clerk who earned less even than teachers earned.
That's true. About, in fact, 25%, 75% less.
And you somehow managed to come through it, and I guess then the world changed.
Well, I think I had a good support structure at home. My wife was working. In fact, so we always laugh because she earned more than me 3 times in my life. But finally I qualified and things got a whole bunch better. And
stayed in the profession rather than going out of it.
I actually never intended to stay, to be honest. But Deloitte is the kind of organization that just gave me opportunity after opportunity to do something interesting. Not necessarily, money's never really been the motivator in my life. If that was the case, you'd never become an article clerk. But at the end of the day, I've never done anything for longer. In fact, being the CEO is the longest I've been, 6 years. Most of the things I've done between 4 or 5 years in different business units, in different areas, So it's been a really exciting time for me. I've enjoyed every minute of it.
You've been, so you're halfway through your second term? Is that the way you guys are? Remember, again, just going through the research, that Deloitte has got a very unusual process. You become a chief executive for terms, or a 4-year term, and then you can have a second term, but then no more.
That's right, yeah. And so in my case, I've done the 4-year term. I'm 2 years into the third term, but I cannot do the third year. 2 years into my 3 years, I cannot do the third year because the retirement age at Deloitte is 62. So I've hit the 62 mark. So.
And what are you going to do after that?
I've been working since I'm 17, so I think I'm going to take about a few months off. but I've got a couple of things I'd like to pursue. But I'm looking for the one thing that's going to really interest me. I want to do something that interests me, more than anything else.
Grant, what about public service? Many in other parts of the world, people with your background, experience, qualifications would gravitate towards the public service. We don't have that culture in South Africa, but I guess it's got to start sometime.
Yeah. Ideally, I think I started out saying that's exactly what I'd like to do. I'd like to take something that is... Because if you look at my history in Deloitte, I've always been around turning around businesses, except in the last couple of years where there was a need to turn around. But I think it's so politicized that actually discourages people. So I've sort of given it up on the basis that it's just far too political to try and do something. There are so many rules and regulations. Whereas in business you can be a lot more agile. Public service prevents you from being agile. I think the Public Finance Management Act is a very good act, but it's also a very, very restrictive act. It prevents people from taking some calculated risks, let alone uncalculated risks. So yeah, I'd love to do it. In fact, it was my first choice, but I just think politically, I think it'll be very difficult to do.
Well, hopefully that will change, and hopefully someone will listen to this and say, hang on, we can't let this talent leave us, because clearly you do have that part in your personality. Mentioned on your CV, the African Children's Feeding Scheme. Didn't get any more detail. Can you tell us about it?
Well, basically, until recently, I was the chairman of the African Children's Feeding Scheme. And we've sort of, in the last 6 years, grown it from feeding about 18,000 children a day to today we feed about 32,000 children a day.
Where?
Mainly in Soweto, mainly Pimville, Dobsonville, and there's another area around helping mothers to make dressmaking goods and that type of thing, and helping them sell that. Deloitte provides a nice little infrastructure around controls and that type of thing. And then also trying to find people who are going to make the donations to keep us going. So, for example, we're very grateful to Tiger Brands for their contribution. And part of our role is making sure that whatever Tiger Brands gives us ends in the right place. So we've spent a lot of time doing that. And I've enjoyed every minute of it. But it's almost a tradition that the CEO of Deloitte takes over that role. And the reason for that is it provides a great deal of infrastructure. But I'm not lost to African Children's Feeding Scheme. I'll still be working and helping them along the way.
What about private sector, Grant? We have seen that ex-managing director, chief executives or senior partners of the auditing firms are snapped up for boards of directors. There's always an audit committee that needs a CA to run it. Are you looking at that as a possible next step?
I have. I've actually accepted 2 listed companies, which I can't obviously mention until the SENS announcement comes out. But and clearly, I don't want too many. I want to keep my hand in. I want to keep busy, but I want to do a whole lot of other things. And so, still to be defined, sadly. But so I haven't overreached myself around audit committees and boards and that type of thing. So I want to keep it a little bit on the light side so that I can do other things as well.
When you were appointed, there was an article in the Financial Mail which spoke about your personality being very different to your predecessor, Vasi Naidu. Now, I think everybody excepting an absolute showman would be different to Vasi. He certainly was out there. Have you found that it's influenced Deloitte in some way, given that one knows that a fish rots from the head, but also a fish is healthy from the head as well? So any chief executive has that kind of influence on the company.
I think, yeah, Vasi and I go back a very long way, by the way, and we are almost diametrically opposed in terms of personality. But I say opposites get on a lot better, but Vasi was very good for Deloitte and did very well, and I think just being me and not being Vasi actually people adjusted, and we worked very well together. I think the clients don't see me as flamboyant as Vasi, but I get the job done. If there's problems, we sort it out. If there's things to be done, we get it done, and so we've driven things like quality, client relationships, making sure we understand what the client wants, making sure that the audit is absolutely according to standards, and sure, there will be failures at times, but by and large, we've limited those failures to very, very few. And I think that's been respected by the business community by and large, and by the partners themselves. I sadly have an open door policy, which actually basically means that you don't get a lot of work done during the day, because people do pop in and they do have views. Some of them very good, and some of them we use.
But it's, again, just to kind of close off with, when we spoke 6 years ago, I asked you, how would you define a successful stay? And right then, that was a time of Enron, that was a time of WorldCom. The auditing profession, or the accounting services profession, was under intense scrutiny. And you said then that if you left office and there was trust, or a high level of trust for the brand, for Deloitte, amongst the business community, you would have felt that you would have succeeded. Do you think that you passed that?
I think we do have a high level of trust. Excuse me. I think a lot of the partners have grown into being more client attuned. We've put lots of effort and time into making sure that So if I look at it, I think we are a trusted brand. One of the things, whenever I talk to the partners or the staff, I always say to them, we're not here for profit. Profit is a consequence. It's a consequence of developing and getting good people in place, and it's a consequence of making sure we serve our clients the way they expect to be served. It's not an end in itself. And I think that's driven right through the business, and I think it's served us well.
Is that the kind of message you would tell a young person who is inspired by your story? Because there are many who possibly won't even dream that they could get to the heights that you've managed to reach, coming from the humble background that you came from, who I'm sure would love to be having this conversation with you now.
I absolutely believe, and I've never moved a job for money. I've never considered remuneration in any job. I've always considered whether it'll be interesting, it's what I want to do, and can I make a decent contribution. You don't lobby for CEO jobs. You don't lobby for senior executive positions. People come to you because they respect you and because you've done the right things and you've done well. If you have to lobby for it, you probably don't deserve it.
Gelink, the outgoing Chief Executive of Deloitte, Southern Africa. Upper Echelon was brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte.